Here to listen to this. I hope I have some information for you. Again, my name is Dianne Grenier, for those who don't know me. I've been in Andover for about 10 years now. I spent 3 years on the Alcoa board. I own lakefront property here, and I am not a historian, but I am interested in the lake, and I'm a collector. And what I've been doing is collecting information about Andover Lake. This is part of my collection. I'm hoping that people that come here today can help with the collection of stories and things that happened, how we got to where we are today. A lot of my collection here has big holes in it. I don't have all the information. I don't plan. Do we have a duck joining us? Look at that. Sounds good to him. All right, wants to know about it.
Curious.
I don't claim to be an expert on the lake. Like I say, I just collect the information that people have told us. I am in the process of putting it together, and we'll be putting together a book. I plan to make 4 copies of the book available, one to the Historical Society, one to Alma, one to Alcoa, and one for my own personal use. The original manuscript from there will be given to Alcoa, and they can publish it and sell copies for a fundraiser or whatever they choose to do with it. The due date on the book is 1995. We're still working. Let's see. It's a long history, the lake. One of the questions I want to ask before we get started, how many people here have served on Alcoa or Alma from time to time? We have some. We do have the president of Alma is with us, Jennifer McDonald, and I don't see the president of Alcoa here, but that's good, because these are the people that we thank, all the past board directors from the Lake Association that have made the lake what it is today. The lake today is, some of you, the first time you've been here, welcome to Andover Lake. The lake is 155 acres. It's roughly 12 feet deep. It's incredibly clean. Members, lake residents have been told by the DEP that it's the second cleanest lake in the state of Connecticut. The water is very clean. It has a trench over on the other side that's about 15, 16 feet deep. That's the deepest part of the lake. It has some excellent fishing. Largemouth bass, some of the best in the state of Connecticut. All over the lake. You can catch bass everywhere. It also has, panfish. There are some trout, not too many because it is basically a warm water lake, but there are some cold spots and you can get some trout that hang up in there. But, pickerel and catfish and pumpkin seeds, perch, pickerel.
Bluegills.
Bluegills.
Tons of them.
Lots of bluegills, lots of pumpkin seeds,
Yep.
which hopefully will be the next state fish.
Great fishing for little kids.
Yes, for little kids and for big kids. It's a great fishing lake. It is a totally private lake. There is no town access, no state access. There is no money that comes to the Lake Association from the town, from the state, from the feds. There are several right-of-ways. It's for members only. Anybody who pays the membership dues can be a member. I asked the president to bring membership application forms. If anybody wants one, see me. I can get you one. The dues run like $185 to $250. They're graduated, complex schedule. But once you pay, you can use the lake. One of the neat things about this lake is no motorboats whatsoever. They're not even for ice fishing, electric augers. All it is paddle boats, canoes, sailboats, which makes it very quiet. Okay, get into the actual real history. Oh, let me add this in my pocket. I want to just pass these out. If anybody here, this is who I am and how you can get in touch with me. If anybody has any information or thinks of anything later, please get in touch with me. I'm interested in all stories. I've done a lot of interviewing of many of the past active members of the lake. I still have many yet to do, and hopefully get this story together. But I guess if we go back to the beginning, 350 million years ago, the Earth was formed. We won't spend a lot of time with that. After it cooled, we had the dinosaurs walking around here, the age of the reptiles. We do know that reptiles, we assume they came over this area. We know we have evidence of them being in Manchester and Coventry, Rocky Hill. So we can assume that dinosaurs walked here until the Great Ice Age, when we had the Mile High, Ice Age came through. And with that, it was kind of refine the geography that we have here. It gorged out the Hop River Valley, kind of rounded our mountains into hills, and defined the wetlands that we have today, and the streams and rivers, things like that. And when it left us here in Andover. We had a couple of streams that converged right out in the middle of Andover Lake. One was Cheney Brook, which starts up here. You can see it by Brazola Road, comes down from Brazola Road, and it just drains the headwaters. I mean the watershed. There's no real headwaters up there, just some swampland. The other one is an unnamed brook that runs over here by Erdoney Road. And these two rivers, or streams actually, met down here, and this was pretty much wetlands, a lot of swampland. They converged and they formed Blackman Stream, which ran down to the Hop River. And the Hop River met the Willimantic River down just east of Willimantic, town of Willimantic, goes through Willimantic, converges with the Shetucket. From the Shetucket, it joins with the Quinnipiac, which joins with the Thames, and then goes into Long Island Sound. So what we do in our water here goes directly, ends up in Long Island Sound. Not exactly directly, but it does end up there. After the glaciers left us, man started inhabiting the area, and of course the first people to inhabit the area were the Indians. We had the Algonquin Indians were the first ones to come. They came from the west, and we had the Nipmuc Indians and the Podunk Indians settled the basic area here, and they were a very peaceful people. They did hunting and gathering berries and things like that. And about, I think it was 1590, the Pequot Indians, they were based over in the Hudson River Valley in New York. They had a little rift among the tribe, and thousands of them left. And they spent 40 years going east, looking for land to settle and start a new nation, an Indian nation. Well, they ran into the Narragansett Indians over in Rhode Island, who were a much fiercer group than the Nipmucs and the Pequot, Podunks, which the Pequots pretty much bullied them around. They didn't go north because they had the Mohegans up there, and they were pretty ferocious also. So the Pequot Indians settled in what we call today Foxwoods, down in that down in that area. But they hunted in this area here. And, back in the early 1600s, the white man came up the Connecticut River, started settling Windsor and Hartford area. In 1632, the Pequot Indians were at their height. They were busy bullying the other Indians in the area, and the white man was settling in. And by 1637, we had Captain John Mason from Hartford was told to take care of these Indians. They were really getting to be quite a nuisance. Yeah, he did, and that's the big statue that we're now having problems with locally here. But John Mason hooked up with Uncas, the Indian, who was having a problem with the rest of the tribe. He decided he should be chief, and there were some governmental problems. So Uncas hooked up with John Mason, and they went down to Montville and pretty much annihilated the main Pequot tribe down there. And Uncas thought that he would now be the big chief and own all the land that the main tribe owned. The white man had no idea. He said, "No, you can be chief. We don't care about that. But you can have this chunk of land." part of which is here, Andover today. And the white man took the rest of the land for the settlers. They were going to settle this. And from there, you know, we ended up with, they passed it down to their sons, Joshua, and then they fought. They were always fighting over who should be the chief, who owns the land. And the land ended up being sold, to the white man. And there was, let's see, there was we have some maps here that'll actually show you back in 1720. This is the Andover Lake today, where it is. In 1720, we had a Henry Dyer and Thomas Porter own the property, and it goes through several different people. And they farmed it. Thomas Porter, back in 1700, he was a cobbler, and he had the house over where I believe it's Ken Lester's house. The stone foundation is still there, and that was the first house in Andover. He thought he was in, I think it was Hebron. He was in the wrong town. The town thought he, and the first child born, it was a boy, was born in that house over there. And he finally decided he was in the wrong town, sold, and he moved out. And the property here ended up in the hands of, let's see, Marvin Cheney. And back, let's see, now we get to 1925, you know, several sellings of the property. We get 1925. Andover had some business people here who decided, I guess it was basically Charlie White. We had Charlie White, George Stanley, and Ed Yeomans, Judge Ed Yeomans. I think Charlie White was really the guy with the bright idea of what we can do is buy up that property over Cheney Hollow, that's what they call it. Before that it was Hutchinson's Land, but the Cheney Hollow area. We'll build a dam, flood the area, we'll make all these little small lots, and we'll make a summer resort area. And this is great. We'll sell stock in corporation. The residents in town will be the stockholders, and we'll be rich. And we'll sell this to, you know, to out-of-towners, basically, was where they were aiming. And what could be finer? Well, before they went too far, they decided to bring this to the town to see what the rest of the residents in town thought. Of course, there was only about 400 residents in town in 1925. Let's see, what else can I tell you about 1925? Scott, you probably know more than this than I do. This was really an undeveloped section of town. I mean, we are in the southeast corner. The town was developed around what we call the old Grange, or the old town hall. That was the active town hall. There was the hotel was there. There was a general store. There was a railroad that went through. Still goes. The bed's still there. And how many trains were going through town?
I think in the 1920s, about 50 trains a day coming through. The Andover had a unique area because it was the only part of single track in the area, so every train had to meet here at the station and pull off. We had 4 sidings down there. But the whole center of town and all of life at that point in time revolved around that railroad station down there at the center of town, which is now Center Street, which was the equivalent of Route 6 at that point in time before it was relocated in the 1930s.
Okay, and Route 6 is, you can still see remains of it. Merritt Valley Road used to be Route 6, then went to Route 6, and then 316 up to Center Street, and it would wiggle down by the church and pick up Hutchinson Road, was part of Route 6. Bailey Road, I mean, Route 6 just snaked right through town. It wasn't always as straight and wide and an expressway that it is today. There have been improvements made to Route 6. But that was, you know, 19, really. That was 1925. So anyway, these local businessmen with their idea here, let's make a lot of money, went to the town hall, called a town meeting, and the residents were really concerned about what kinds of people that they were going to attract. They didn't want to turn this into some sort of a gypsy camp, you know, and the business people said, don't worry, we can handle this. And one of the things that they did to ensure that a couple things that they did to ensure that this would not be a shanty town, have you, was in the deeds to the property, they put in basically which is today's planning and zoning regulations. I have a copy of it here. They're land usage restrictions, and they restricted things where they said that if you're going to buy property here, that you can only have one dwelling. You must have a septic system, no cesspools, things like that. They talked about your chimney construction, the roof, you have to have a 25-degree, pitch to it, and no stables, pigsties, slaughterhouses. The lot should not be subdivided. You can't have a for sale sign out. I mean, 14 different restrictions here to say that these are going to be nice places. You have to construct a building that's worth at least $15,000. $1,500. Thank you. Yeah. Decimal points. What do I know? So this wasn't going to be a shabby place. Also, back 1925, they had what they called the town had asked for pleasing restrictions. They said we wouldn't sell any property to blacks or Jews. Again, 1925, this was not uncommon. I understand travelers, in 1909, I saw an application form for employment. Blacks and Jews need not apply. We've come a long way in a lot of fronts, and this is one also. This got us in a lot of trouble later on. But 1925, that's the way it was, and off they went. So the town thought this was great. They were selling stocks at $10 a share, and they had a real estate office, which is Jim Anderson's, where the house right over here in the cove with the nice railing fence. Everybody know where that is? Right across from Eileen Ray's. That was basically the real estate office. You go in there, and they had brochures. Here's summer resort. They had a map that looked like this. Harry Daggett. Harry. He was a surveyor. Made the high water line and divided up all the properties, moved the lots, gave them numbers, and you'd go into the office, and you'd pick out which house you'd like to live, you'd like to buy. This side of the lake here developed first. That side over there, they didn't even think about developing it. That was trash land. That was swamp. It was wet. That was the last part to develop. One of the clever things they did, they made this area here the beach, because this is all natural sand. I would have thought that they would decide to put the beach over there and move the sand, but no, they thought since the sand was here, they would leave it here and call this the beach, which is really a good idea. The beach here has been bulldozed around, and they've readjusted it so that it looks like it does today. They've obviously put in the barriers here. And, let's see, where I was going to this. No, they were selling the property. They actually built the dam, constructed the dam, and Scott has a good newsletter here that gives you a lot of the detail on the dam construction. Because we have some pictures here. But it actually started to fill up in 1927. Is when they started filling the lake. And 1929, we had the stock market crash. I mean, this was we had problems. At that point, nobody was buying lakefront property up in eastern Connecticut. So they ended up having a real hard time selling the lots. They just weren't selling. And they had a lot of financial problems. They had to build some roads. Roads were a big problem. The road over by Bob Pitzinger's there was underwater. You used to go across that cove, so they had to redo that.
The hard thing still is.
It still does. West Street Road here came down to where the old Red Barn was, cut across here. So you redrew that. Lakeside Drive was added. I mean, all the little side streets were added. Bazzola Road and up there Brown Drive. Those were all added later. But roads were a big consideration. But the biggest problem, again, was selling lots. They just weren't selling. They did have the Red Barn, which was white when they first bought the property, and when they raised the water, and you can see very clearly here, what we call the old red barn was in the water. So they had to, it also came with a farmhouse. The farmhouse was, before Cheney bought the area, the Hutchinsons, I think they're related to the Hutchinsons of today. Are they? Yeah, Scott, except we have holes in this. The farmhouse was in real bad shape and had to be torn down. But they saved the red barn, well, the white barn at the time, painted it red at one point, but had to move it back out of the water. Let's see. So that's 1925, and we're not selling the properties too fast. We've got the barn, we've got the roads, dealing with them. In 1935, they had sold some of the properties, and people were now occupying them as summer cottages. And the people they wanted representation with the Andover Lake Corporation. And the Lake Corporation is the first owners. That was the Ed Yeomans and George Stanley. They incorporated in like 1926 to build it, to sell it, to be the business unit. In 35, the property owners got together, wanted some representation with this group, and that was Alcoa, the Andover Lake Property Owners Association. And they incorporated, and again, these are the members, and it was the people who had bought the cottages in the area. And they would deal with the Lake Association, the Andover Lake Corporation. They tootled around here until, when it got to be late 40s, I guess, we ended up with these lake usage restrictions. They were only good until 1950. They had a 25-year life on them. And people were getting a little nervous. What was going to happen in 1950? I mean, this whole place was going to go to hell in a handbasket. I mean, people were going to be able to do whatever they wanted here. They were no longer going to hold them to this. The corporation still hadn't sold half the lots. One of the major contributors to the corporation, Harry Bliss, died, and at that point they decided the corporations that we're out of here, and they offered the lake, the beach, the red barn to the lake members, to Alcoa. Let's talk about selling this. Just cut their losses and be done. Alcoa was a little bit nervous about this. Oh gosh, what are we going to do? The liability. Liability was a big deal to them. Owning the lake, what if somebody gets hurt? So they had a lawyer, and the lawyer said, we make a separate corporation, and they will just be the holders of the land. And that was ALMA, the Andover Lake Management Association. They actually became incorporated in 1951. They took ownership of the lake. Of course, late 40s, also while they're deciding to sell it, Pratt Whitney and the insurance companies start hiring people. They can't hire enough people over there. Places like Coventry Lake, Andover Lake, all these summer cottages are being bought up. They're being converted into year-round homes, and they're selling all the properties, and the corporation, whoops, too bad. It's pretty much timing is everything in life. They're out. Alma sold the properties, I think within a year, to pay back the corporation for all, the money that they had borrowed, and this was it. This was great for them. Corporation. They went on their merry way, and like I say, this did not turn out to be a very profitable venture for them. Let's see, now we're up to 1950. Over the years, many of the same things kind of come up, There's always a problem with taxes. Are we being taxed too much? Yeah, we are. Insurance, liability. We had one year here where we couldn't get insurance. We were insured by Lloyd's of London. All it takes is one accident, and we're up the creek, folks. But we have things like the Red Barn. Red Barn we sold in the early 90s. Most of you remember this. Back in '84, there was some big floods, and a dam down in Iverton gave way, and the DEP decided they better inspect all these little dams, and they came and took a look at our dam and said, fix it. Needs to be able to withstand the 100-year flood, and yours doesn't. So it took us several years. So the first thing, since we don't have any money from the town, from the state, from the feds, no money is available to us, the burden fell on the residents, the members. Generally, the alcohol membership is about 200, 240, that sort of thing. This year we have 270. This is a real good year for membership. 71. I stand corrected. Okay, 271. But these are the people that had to pay for the dam. There wasn't any real money available. They started doing some creative things to get some money to do the dam repairs. Part of it was selling little pieces of property. The biggest thing they had to do was sell the Red Barn, which is incredibly painful to many of the people. But they built the dam. It's a wonderful dam, don't you think? Yep. And of course, with the development of the lake of course is still developing. And one of the things that the people who were in charge of building the dam, with a little bit of forethought here, if you look at the dam, over on the left side, they have these pillars that they put in there. Those are footings for a walkway, for a bridge. We're in the process of getting the right-of-ways and clearing the path, and a whole variety of stuff that needs to be done. And there will be a walkway over the dam so that we can walk totally around the lake without having to go down to Route 6.
The original design was designed to have a roadway across it, where Lakeside Drive was supposed to go. When the lake was built, Lakeside Drive was put in, it was a dead end. It didn't connect until the 1940s when they built the school up there. That road, you can still go down and look at the woods, you can see where the road went down to the dam. There were slots built in the original spillway to put girders for a roadway across there. And promotional literature actually talks about being able to drive around the dam on a nice sunny summer afternoon.
Okay. I know Lakeside Drive was done in pieces, as were, like Bazzola Road was also done in pieces, and, right. Let's see. What else do we need to chat about? I could chat all day about this. I'm hoping that people here have brought stories, because that's really what I want to hear. Let's go back to the Red Barn before I leave. The Red Barn back in the 50s, 60s, 70s was quite the hot spot in town. I read things in it. I find it amazing that hundreds of people would go to dances over there. Teenage hundreds of people. I mean, every night there was something going on there. They had potluck dinners. They had bingos. They had movies. They had excuse me, cookouts. Yeah, potluck. And I was like, wow. And this is one of the problems when they decided to sell the Red Barn, that was so painful for people that they weren't going to have this sort of activities anymore. But actually, in all reality, those activities hadn't happened for quite some time. At the time that we were selling it, and there were a variety of reasons. And I think mostly, come the 80s, this was no longer a summer community. There's very few houses here now left in the lake that are summer houses. These are all year-round houses. In the 80s, both the husband and the wife is off to Harvard or someplace working. So we didn't have, the wife, Mrs. Cleaver is no longer home with the beaver, making meals and all this sort of thing. I mean, they just weren't here. They come home from work now, and they had other things to do. So that lifestyle had changed a whole lot around the lake.
The barn had also deteriorated.
That was a real problem too. The barn, the sill needed work. There was a lot of work. The barn had always been a source of a black hole for money. I mean, they put a kitchen on it, which was a wonderful addition, but it always needed to be painted, or it needed to be roofed, or it needed, looking for volunteers, you had to mow the grass.
Great home for bats, too.
The bats were, the bats always had it. They didn't take it over, they always had it. And the stories of how people tried to deal with the bats. I mean, they had little sound detectors out there, they had the mothballs, they had talked to people up at Yukon, they had, the best thing that they found was to get a couple of the good old boys would go down there on Saturday morning and they'd shoot, you know, and that was the most effective way of dealing with the bats. The bats were always a major problem. They had these fold-out chairs, and whenever you wanted to use it, you'd have to go and clean the chairs before you could use them, you know, clean it afterwards. And since I'm a new kid in town, I went, the first annual meeting that I went to was the last annual meeting that they held in the Red Barn before they stopped using it, and they now use the Grange or the firehouse now for the annual meetings. But there's a lot of fond memories of the Red Barn and the activities that went along with it. There's a lot of vandalism that happened over there. The electric meter would, of course, get ripped off the wall, not even like here. But that again, that was a problem, but a great source of fun, and it was a big center in the community for a long time. Sure, sir.
You're talking about vandalism. I brought some pictures with me. I remember, I can't tell you when it happened.
Can I have your name, sir? I'm sorry.
Bill Bright.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bill. I didn't recognize you.
I
Yes.
take my glasses.
Okay.
Prior to the dam here, between the old dam and this one, there was vandalism on the spillway. And somebody broke the mechanism down there, and all the water ran out of the lake. I brought two pictures with me today, because we had them on our, it shows the lake. Well, there's water, but there's not that much water in the lake.
Okay, yeah, this is when they had a problem with the gate valve.
Yeah, I don't know what year that was. I have no idea.
Yeah. Oh, this is great. But
78, probably. 78.
oh, I think it was longer than that.
78. Oh, 77.
Because
77, 78.
the way they fixed that was old Max Hutchinson went down with a mattress and stuffed the gate valve. And that mattress was there for a long time. It worked. I think it was a little difficult to control the level of the water, which again is one of the things that we've been snitting and snorting about for years, is the water level. It's very difficult. The gate valve is, what, this big, Jennifer, you know, with a 2 foot? Okay. You know, it's not really huge, and you go down there, and you have to decide, you know, how much rain you're going to get. So you open this thing up for a couple of days, and you let it out, and the rain comes in. And we had one year, in the 80s, they didn't guess right, and we didn't get all the snow and the spring rains, and we didn't capture all the spring rains, and the lake didn't fill up to its recreational level.
Very muddy summer.
Yeah, people weren't real happy about that. They weren't happy at all. But again, there's no real river or stream that fills the lake. All we have, there's many small little brooks or creeks that just drain the watershed to fill the lake. We do have some springs. If anybody's been swimming out there, you know exactly where they are. Woo! You know, from the old swamp, there's some springs that fill the lake, but there's no real water source. So trying to control the level is difficult. The dam that was completed in '91 does a better job of that because of the design of the spillway. It dumps large amounts of water.
We have a lot of trouble on our end because we're down the other. People constantly are walking back and forth. They have either the fish or whatever, and you know they're not supposed to be there. But
right, fishing and swimming and boat access is not allowed from the dam.
My family used to get mad at me because we had company, and I look over and I see somebody walking over there, and I go down there and you know, I never got myself into a confrontation because I'd always say, well, you're not supposed to be there. Nobody ever gave me a hard time.
Yep. Well, the Lake Association has in the past had constables, and they do have one again. We went for several years without one, but when we built the dam, you know, back when dues to the association were $5, $10. I mean, they were $25 for a long time. When we had to come up with $350,000 between 240 members, dues escalated quickly. And one of the things that the members yelled and screamed about was if they were going to pay this kind of dues, they didn't want to share this with non-paying members, that people must pay. So that they do have a security guard and goes around, and members themselves patrol and will ask people to leave. And yeah, it's not being shared for non-paying. They don't tolerate trespassers.
How do the fish get in? I've always wondered that question.
The fish, how did they get in? They were put in.
I know that.
There were several stockings of thousands of fish. They've stocked with largemouth bass. They've stocked with, again, perch, sunfish, pumpkin seed, next state fish, pickerel, perch, catfish, bullheads, those sorts. Even some trout. Trout were stocked, but this isn't, again, not the right habitat for trout. Yeah, they kind of hold up in the springs, but it's not a real trout lake. I know of somebody now who, and we really don't encourage this, in fact, we really don't try to discourage this, who is going to other lakes, catching fish, and bringing them here. They're catching. They would like us to have a smallmouth bass population here. Smallmouth bass is really a much better game fish than the largemouth bass, and so he goes out fishing and brings them here. So if you catch a smallmouth bass, they're illegally being put into the lake. And the reason we don't like to do that, any bass or any fish at all should not come from another lake, because you don't know what they're carrying, what kind of diseases, what kind of vegetation that is attached to them. You know, they can wipe out our whole fish population. They can introduce, you know, vegetation that we really don't want.
Couldn't you just buy some from fisheries so you know they're safe, smallmouth?
We don't. This is not the proper habitat for a smallmouth bass. Smallmouth bass like colder water, gravel, bottom. This is really mostly sand, silt, and warm. It's too warm for them. So, yeah, if they find a spring, they'll hang out. But it really wouldn't be a good idea for us to purchase. You know, we have talked with the DEP. In 1959, the DEP came out and they did, for anybody who fishes, Charlie who know about it, the Blue Book, where they did, I don't know how many lakes and rivers, lakes, they did a analysis of them. They did all the contour maps, they tested the water, you know, what kind of chemicals were there, what kind of fish, and a very extensive analysis of the lakes. Andover Lake was one of them, and we are in the 1959 Blue Book. That's where we get the topographical map, comes from that survey. Also in the lake, talking about wildlife, we have a large bird population. I mean, we have osprey here, we have blue heron, green heron, a lot of waterfowl. We have a swan that is, from time to time comes and joins us, mallards, Canadian geese. Yeah, it's wonderful. And again, I think some of that goes to the fact that they're not hassled. I mean, what is this, 3 o'clock maybe on a beautiful sunshiny day? Look at how many boats are out there. None. The lake is not overly used, and most people like it that way. Let's see.
What is causing the lake to be colored? In other words, some days you go out and you can't even see the bottom.
Yeah, it's a blue-green it's an algae bloom. Yeah, it's a natural happening. The Lake Association presently is in the process of, they have a firm that they're working with, an engineering firm, to study that sort of thing. They're getting a data bank on the quality of the lake. Right now they're developing a database so that they can decide what to do. We don't have nearly the problems of some of our lakes in the area, so we're pretty happy about that. In the past, it hasn't been the case. We have in the past used copper sulfate to take care of some of the weed and algae problems. We have had lots of weeds. Some of the old timers will tell you, this cove over here has been choked full. Down by the big glacier rocks used to be all lily pads. You couldn't get a canoe through there, basically. We don't have that today. Today there's very little vegetation, and that's because the Lake Association for many years now, I guess when they started, they do drop the water level every winter to what they call the winter level. They start that sometime, there's a date, the end of October. Yeah. And it's back up to the recreational level by April 1st is what the due date. Yeah, the idea is, again, we don't want to get caught with not catching the spring rains, and it's important to keeping the lake at the level that we enjoy.
Folklore has it, and I'm not sure how accurate it is, but back when they were going to flood this area, that it was somewhat farmland, marshland, and they built the dam and flooded it. And then when it froze in the wintertime, they went out with their chainsaws and their ice barges and cut off the trees.
Yes.
At that level.
Yes.
So that when the water goes down now, down especially at the dam end, there are the tree stumps that are still preserved in that water.
Yeah, if you look, we have a picture here that shows, this was in the early 70s, I believe, when we drained it. You can see all the stumps, and that's exactly what happened. Was part of the property originally was swamp, and part was farmland. They did, I don't know what they raised here. Do you know, Scott?
It's called meadowland. We just use it basically for grazing.
Cattle, sheep, animals.
A lot of horses and sheep generally.
Okay.
Probably cattle. This was a couple of all-purpose farms that were combined into one farm. The Knickerbocker Place and the Reed homestead, I believe, were the two that prior to Cheney combining the two. There was a third farm on the other side that was part of the lake as well. But yes, that paper I handed out talks very much about that. They went in on the dry side during the fall and logged as much as they possibly could, and then when it froze over, they went into the swampy areas. They did it. By the time they closed the valve and started raising the level of the water, they still had a lot of logging left to do, and it wasn't really chainsaws, it was mostly 2-man crossbar saws at that point in time. They did set up sawmills, and a sawmill on either side, and we did get, I think it's like 150,000 feet of board lumber out of here and stuff. But they just burned brush and stumps that just stayed there, because we really didn't have bulldozers and things at that time.
So if you look, when they do, you start seeing the tree stumps, there's still 6 feet of water in there. I know, because I went out one February, back in, when they were doing the dams, so this had to be early 90s, we were getting calls to the tune of, I hope you're happy now, look at the lake is totally bone dry, you've taken all the water out. I mean, just look at all the tree stumps, nobody cuts tree stumps 6, 8 feet tall, So I went out, February, measured the water, and lordy, there was still 6 feet of water, and, we had tree stumps, so, yeah, when you see all the tree stumps, there's still lots of water. We didn't lose all the fish.
If you scuba dive at all, you can swim very clearly.
If you fish a lot.
Yes. Yeah, you
can find
use
them
a lot of
also.
hooks. Oh, yeah.
Yes, and there's lots of glacier rocks, particularly on this side. There's more big rocks.
And the rock that's known as a split rock is not even, it's two separate rocks.
That big glacier rock?
It's not one rock that got split, it's two separate rocks.
Oh, okay.
I have a friend that went scuba diving around it one day, and he says, couldn't connect it anywhere.
No.
At least not above.
Where you didn't say?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Even way down under the water, two
Mhm.
separate rocks. Which kind of blows the whole idea of it being a split rock.
Well, it makes nice stories. Nice stories. Let's see. We have lots of stories about the lake, and one of them was Chucky Skoog. Everybody know Chucky? The Chucky Skoog accident. That was in 1955. Chucky was I believe 17 years old, and there's lots of stories. But I've chatted with Chucky in great detail to find out exactly what happened. And yes, Chucky was basically diving off the raft at the time when he broke his neck, but the raft was up on the beach. okay, and he had come running down the beach here, jumped off the raft into the water with a bar of soap in his hand because he was going to take a shower for supper, and he did not hit anything. It was the angle. He hit the water, broke his neck, and he's in a wheelchair today. He's now 60-some-odd years old, and that, fortunately for us, is the worst accident we've had. I don't believe we've ever had a...
I was going to ask you, I was talking to a man about a month ago who was a native here, and he told me, unless it was a story, that years ago somebody drowned out here. I just wondered if that was a fact.
Two people have drowned.
Two? Yeah.
I don't know the exact times, I don't even know the names, but there have been 2 drownings in the lake. And in those days, they used to use a grappling hook on the end of a rope and drag from a boat to lift the body and pull them out.
So you're talking way back, like 30s, 20s?
Again, I don't know the exact dates, but definitely before the 50s. I'm not that familiar. And again, it is hearsay. I don't have
Again,
documents
we have a lot of
facts,
history. We
but
haven't been able to find any...
the fire department definitely has records of pulling one out with a grappling hook.
Is that right?
The second one is purely hearsay.
Back at the Andover volunteer fire department we have here in town, that was established in 1938, and part of that was from the urging of the lake community at the time. Of course, many, we only had 400 people in town, so many of the people that started the association were also on the fire department. But what we used to happen here with these little summer cottages, they'd get a fire, they'd burn to the ground. I mean, there was no come save them. They had to come from Hebron, Lebanon, and all the houses. They would just.
So that's true of any house in town.
Yeah, they would just. But when they started, the first house, 1938 was the first house that became winterized in the area. Until then, they were just summer cottages. It didn't take long after that to winterize the rest of them. So we have.
There was another time that the Alma got sued, in 1970, the cottage next to me, they had visitors from the water there.
Yep.
One of the kids was party, and nobody was watching her, off the rock right at the shore.
Yeah, it doesn't take much to get sued. Yeah, that was an 11-year-old girl, and she was hospitalized for a long time. They didn't think she would ever walk, but she did. She did come out of it for about a year, and she ended up being all right. Maybe walk a little limp or something like that, but did walk, and we did get sued for that as well.
They had trouble too out here with a colored family. I remember way back. Some church brought a colored family out here, and this is way back when race relations weren't the greatest.
That was in 1955. The local church here had a guest speaker. Reverend Phil Potts came to town, and again, guest speaker there, and came down here. He had a friend, Gene Wolfe, lived over here. Showed him the lake, and he loved it. He loved the area. I mean, this was a great area. Gene Wolfe was a minister from a Baptist church, I believe. He was ready to sell his property, so he sold it to Reverend Phil Potts. And Phil Potts bought, I think, the late 50s. And the way the membership was established back since the beginning of time was, in order to be a member, in order to use the lake, okay, let's go back. Alma, the Management Association, owned the lake property, and they gave permission to members of Alcoa to use the lake. They were the only people that could use the lake were Alcoa members. Okay, so in order to use it, you have to be an Alcoa member. In order to be an Alcoa member, you had a few things you had to do. One was you had to have 3 sponsors, 3 other members that had to say that you were a fine, upstanding person and that you should be a member. You had to live within the lake community, the lake area, own property. And at the annual meeting, you had to receive 2/3 of the votes of the membership to say, yay, this person should be a member. And they had been doing this since since forever, since 1935, and never was a problem. Reverend Phil Potts came to town, bought a house, wasn't lakefront, it was across the street, the President Basili home. You know where Basili lives, up by Cape Coral. And he came in, I think it was 1958, applied for membership, got himself 3 sponsors, owned property, went to the meeting, no discussion, just these people want to be members. Reverend Phil Potts didn't get 2/3 vote. Okay, no discussion, fine, he's not a member. He tried that 2 more times, never could get the 2/3 membership required to be a member. He felt that it was because he was black. So he sued. He sued the association. The suit started in 1964. This is at the time that the civil rights movement was in full swing. The Lake Association was defending its right as a private club, their bylaws, and how they should how they choose their members. It was ugly. There was no doubt about it. People joining sides. Phil Potts claiming it was racist. The Lake Association claiming that they can exclude anybody. They never gave any reason why they didn't, wouldn't vote him in. In the end, in '68, they settled, and in the courts, and Alcoa lost. Now, then, what that said was, anybody who wanted to use the lake could use it without paying membership dues. You didn't have to be a member to use the lake, as long as you lived within the area. They claimed it was the way that Alcoa was selling their property, the fact that they had a real estate office over here that said, here's a map, where do you want to live, look at this beautiful lake, no motors, and they would sell it as a package. And so they decided there was implied rights to use the lake. And they didn't rule on it as a race issue, but as a lake usage. Just really scared, let's say, the bejeebies out of the Alcoa, because anybody who bought property now could use the lake without paying membership dues. So, of course, Alcoa appealed the decision and went back to court, and while they're snitting and snorting about it, basically, they came to a settlement that everybody agreed to, and that was that we would change our bylaws on how we elect or how we allow membership, and that's what we have today, which is basically anybody who's willing to pay the dues can be a member. And there's no more of this, you need sponsors, no more, you need 2/3 vote.
How many people were rejected for membership before the Reverend was rejected?
None. Never.
Well, maybe that's why.
That was the point. Well, absolutely, and it got to be a real hassle. We had the Governor Dempsey was involved. We had the Attorney General asked that Alcoa's charter be, taken back, and the NAACP was in it. We got on the front page of the New York Times. It seems that the first selectman at the time was David Yeomans. His brother, John Yeomans, was treasurer. They had opposite views. Churches got involved. It was a big deal. And yeah, there were, yes.
I think you might add, Dianne, and you said something there that had a heavy bearing on this whole deal. The civil rights movement throughout the country was at its height. And I was on the Alma board at the time, and we decided that that was one of the things that was causing all this, because they were always looking for stronger support to spread out and lobby. And of course, they were lobbying in every state practically in the country at that time, as you said, and Washington was no exception. Now, actually, what happened after this was all over, it just cost the association a lot of bucks. Phil Potts never showed his face back here again. Now, I don't know how long he held on to the property, but he never came back here at all, which was obvious proof that it was a move to get this thing swinging and support the whole thing around the country on the civil rights issue.
Well, at the same time, when the first civil rights laws were passed, private clubs and organizations were exempt.
Yeah.
And at the same time we were having this about our membership, there was a golf club in West Hartford was fighting the same issue as to can we exclude for no reason at all. That has since changed. Over here we have a picture from the Hartford Times. This is 1964 at the time, where Phil Potts wanted to stay out of the lake, you know, and they bring up this whole business about the NAACP. And over here we have down in Mississippi, they're looking for those 3 civil rights activists that were missing and they're deputizing people. And basically, it was the times. And again, I think it's real important that we don't judge what happened then with our values of today because things have changed.
You mentioned, excuse me, go ahead.
No, go ahead, because I was going to take
You mentioned how he got defeated.
Yes.
And on 2 of those occasions, I believe it was 3 votes on one occasion, and it was 5 votes on another occasion.
Mm-hmm.
The heads were getting together and starting to see a little more of this deal. And I personally always told my wife, I said, you know, if that man had gone around and knocked on doors here at the lake and told them exactly what his purpose was, I said he would have got elected by your own meeting at the Red Barn over there. But you see, that never happened. But the whole thing just died as quick as it started after all the money was lost by hand over the court case. It was too bad, but
Did they originally have to apply for, and you may have already answered this, but for, you know, how you touch wetlands now, you have to go through something this size, you have to go through the Army Corps. Did they have to go through the Army Corps of Engineers or anything back then?
The Army Corps of Engineers didn't have all the authority then that they have today.
I don't believe there's any restrictions whatsoever. What
Yeah.
you want to do with your property, you did in those days. Zoning only really came about in the 50s. The Army Corps of Engineers, they said they had a whole different, they were building bridges and things for wars. They weren't worried about stateside type stuff at that point in time.
Yeah.
I'm not aware that there was any organization, town, national, or otherwise, that was going to pass judgment on what you wanted to do. Matter of fact, they didn't even own all the property. They got put under water. One man who would not sell, probably eyeing the future value of the adjoining property, he said, I'm not going to sell you. I said, the hell, they went ahead and flooded his land anyway.
Well, let's try that today, right?
The zoning laws. There were no zoning laws in town at that time.
Right.
And so the lots were smaller. How has that affected what's happening around the ring today? Well, there, you have
Like I say,
zoning regulations.
the Lake Association was very instrumental in getting planning and zoning in town. Again, these land usage restrictions, which are really planning and zoning type laws, ran out in 1950. So come the late 40s, again, people were getting real nervous about what was going to happen, and they pushed, the town didn't really want to do this, they pushed really hard to get a planning and zoning commission to write up some rules and regulations and that. And they did. I think that our planning and zoning commission started in 1951, that sort of thing. And yeah, today they're very strong. A lot of these summer cottages today cannot be converted to year-round homes. They just don't have the setbacks. They don't have the room for septics. All those things that planning and zoning is concerned with. And I think that is, yay, good for us, because if you look at the development of Andover Lake, they're obviously not like Coventry Lake, where there's all those houses and they go tiers, roads and roads up and all that stuff. All
But have
comes down.
these summer places ever been abandoned or left to?
We have
No, I'm in one of them. I thought you're the only one that wasn't converted.
No,
No.
we're in another, we're in.
Oh, okay.
No,
We're in a summer cottage also. but
There
we're
are
rental owners. I mean, that's different than if you buy in now.
No, but often you find that if they can't develop on, you can't make a permanent housing, or you find it with local homes that they just don't bother going there anymore, and
We have-
messed up, so that's what the population.
We have several. I mean, the majority of the homes now are year-round. They've been converted over the years. There's still several summer cottages that either haven't applied to be upgraded or can't be, because they violate.
I don't think we could.
If you're an original owner, you can convert to a year-round house, even though your lot is too small.
Oh, okay.
It's grandfathered.
Well, we did have the problem over by Mr. Bright. Bryce's house a couple of years ago where I don't understand this.
Our next door neighbors.
No, yeah, it was a little small, it was just a lot, but original owner, and it violated side lots, up, down. All the neighbors complained, they couldn't put a septic, so they drilled under the road, put the septic across the road. I mean, there was,
We could spit in
It
our
vi-
neighbor's house and hit it.
Hey, Diane, you wouldn't understand it if you lived where we do now, because the people that built the house don't even live in the house.
well, they never intended to live there, it was just a business investment. And,
No one's ever there.
yeah,
Where's it?
and they were allowed to, and the corner of Sunset and
I hope
Lakeside.
so.
His floor space is not beyond the limit.
Yeah,
He
so,
went up 2 floors.
I hope someday I see a sale sign go up, because it'll be the first to ask him.
yeah, I like I said, that falls under planning and zoning, and a lot of the,
Different
you
meeting.
know, again, the lake is still developing.
It was a loss of a nice forest, it was a nice forest area before they built the house there.
I know that the property owners were not in favor of that, and, but I don't think, I think you guys probably know better than I, how, the last house that was built in the area, other than the affectionate, Dam house, the house that was built,
Yeah, they were having a party yesterday.
yeah, I'm not sure everybody knows about that. That's when they were in the process of building the dam, and we had all our attention on the dam, trying to get it built and stuff. Well, kind of, yeah, that was kind of the rule. In the middle of the night, a house went up. There was some, we've had a lot of controversy here as to whether there were legal permits. There was a stop work order issued at the time, and that again was another.
Is he still living there?
No, the house was been sold at least once.
There was a party there yesterday, because I could hear the radio all the way down. So there was something going on up
Yeah.
there yesterday.
So I know that house was built in the 90s, and then the house over by Bryce's that violated every zoning regulation in town. But again, most of the properties that are left,
Are there any building properties left around now?
probably over the Clark property. But we have a large section down here by Lakeview Drive that's, I believe, is owned by one individual. And is it 2 building lots? Okay, it's a big chunk of property, and I would imagine that is developable.
Town is auctioning one 50-foot lot that they took because it was never assigned originally at this very time.
Excuse me,
There's a 50-foot lot that's being auctioned by the town right now.
On the woods?
I don't believe so. I believe
it's
one of
on
the
Lake
setback
Road up
lots.
from the other section, yeah.
It was never assigned from the original blocks. I found it under non-tax rolls, I guess is what they say.
Is it buildable?
No. The restriction will be that it cannot be developed. And it's part of the setup.
So Diane, to understand it clearly, if someone bought a piece of property that was not listed in the
Waterfront, not waterfront?
still had the rights because it was around the lake when we developed it in the beginning. Say that we're back in 1925, we're going to put a road, and I don't want a lakefront, but I want something on the other side.
Mm-hmm, yeah, right. They did,
Designated lake area.
yeah, the designated lake area, yeah, they carved out this.
And I imagine those lots would be less expensive.
Sure. And they also had, these restrictions address lots that are not lakefront. They didn't have, I think instead of being $1,500, they only had to be $1,250. They had to put up a house, $1,250. So then, it was that sort of
They
thing.
didn't have any stipulation on what we have in our zoning laws other than the septic system, however.
Well, look, they had 14 about farm animals, you know, whether you could have farm animals, whether you could have a garage, we don't have
Not
one
size.
dwelling.
The size wasn't
No,
determined.
they had already determined what the lot sizes were. The Lake Corporation when they divided it up, and since there was no planning and zoning, this was fine, hunky-dory, and 50-foot was fine for summer cottages. Which was another one of the problems that we had when the corporation put this together was when the selling point to the residents was, this is great, you know, basically we're going to sell this, we're going to be the stockholders, we're going to make all the money. These people, they're going to all be out of town, which is basically what they were selling this to, summer resort, and we're not going to have to school their kids because they're only be here in the summertime, you know. And then they're off, you know, what could be fun? You didn't have to plow their roads, I mean, there's gonna be anybody here. It could be a real problem, and they started converting to year-round houses, we had to go to school, to school their children, and, you know. Yeah.
And all those years when the water was way out, you know, I think the year might have been the year that Buck got put in late and then we didn't have any rain all spring. Remember that?
That was recently, late 80s.
Whatever, maybe, or maybe it was before. One of the years when it was way out like that, and I was cleaning after sunken rowboats and so forth, you know, I took trailer loads away of all kinds of old stuff out of the lake.
Bob tries to tell us that the lake is tilted towards his boat.
Anyway, cleaning stuff out, way out there, when the bottom was exposed. And I saw something, and it just didn't look like anything else that was anywhere around there. And so I picked it up and I looked at it. I'll turn it over to the historical association. It might be just a good paperweight, which is what I've been using before, maybe not. But it looks like it could be a meteorite.
Wait a second, my friend's geologist. I'll bring him over.
Just this part was showing.
All right.
It could be a piece of old coke, the clinker, but then nobody around here burns coke. That was a cheap soft coal. So I said, well, maybe it's a meteorite. That was on the bottom of the lake there.
Actually, this looks like the lava rocks I use in my gas grill.
Maybe somebody threw one of those.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he's
Oh,
right
good.
there.
Maybe Scott, you know about boy things.
Yeah, actually, here it comes. Boy things.
Boy things, yeah. Ooh, oh, I know, isn't that bad?
They have a big fine here.
If he, does he smell it? Does he bite it?
He was wondering if it's a meteorite.
There's a lot of rocks around it that look anything like it. So took my attention.
Well, tell them. I'm not 100% sure. Could be some. Could be a piece of slag.
Yeah.
Could be a piece of slag. I'm sure.
And the answer was?
It could be a piece of slag. It's like from the remains from ironworks. Maybe someone just chucked in the water.
An anchor, maybe, huh?
It's no. That's why I'm questioning it. It should be heavier if it's iron, but it's kind of light.
It is
Kryptonite?
It's not.
It's not something about
Okay, it's a boy thing, what do I know?
It looks volcanic, but like.
How about a grill lava rock? That's another theory.
I think it's more earthly than outside of this world.
Oh,
Thank you.
We see interesting things out here. My wife saw it. There was a hot air balloon going over Lake one morning, early on.
yes.
And she called me quickly. She says, "Quick, you got to see this."
She
I was
told
out
us
by
how
the,
bad to see
it was
it.
out by the big rock, and it looked like he touched down, but it was awfully close. You couldn't really tell whether he did or not.
Were they a paperweight?
A couple years ago, we had the ultralight that was buzzing us on a regular basis.
Splash and sink.
Does anybody, the old timer guys, we're looking for, back in 1948, we know that the Lake Association purchased an old World War II Navy rubber raft. You know, I guess there was quite the talk at the time. We were going to blow this thing up, and this was going to be our raft, and this was going to be a wonderful thing, and it was a big boondoggle. They never could. Hmm?
A lot of the lakes do that around here.
Yeah.
Poverty got a couple of
Maybe we never got ours up and operational, or... Let's look and see if we got anything here that... one of the things, if anybody wants to take a look at, I've put together here a timeline, just from 1925 up to 96 here. It's basically what was happening at Andover Lake, in Andover, and in the world all at the same time. And things like 1925, when the lake community was, they were thinking about creating 1925. Over here in Andover, the town hall was wired for electricity, and television was invented. You know, it kind of puts things in perspective here of what we are. Population 1930 was only 430.
And you just back up for a second. Part of the problem with selling lots and things around here was the electricity issue. If anybody that they were trying to target for sales was generally coming from the cities and so forth, which all had electricity long before it made its way out here. We got wired in 1926, 1925 time frame, but the lake did. When they first started selling lots up here and things, there weren't enough houses in this whole area to make it worthwhile putting wires through. So basically they had power down in 6 going down through Willimantic. That's where the power came from the Willimantic Light Company. But the lake wasn't going to get power until there were enough houses up here to justify them running wires up. And of course, who wanted to come up and play that kind of a waiting game when you could go to a lot of other lakes, or you could stay in your own city house and have power and things. It was a brand new thing, but it became very important very quickly. A lot of people were reluctant to go roughing it again.
Do we know when the lake community got
I was hoping you were going to tell me when they put wires around.
Don't know that. There's holes in my collection.
Sometime after the Depression, I would bet. I can't imagine there was enough houses up here during the Depression to get wires up here.
That's another thing. Most of the people that settled in this area came from Manchester, East Hartford, came from the west. They did not come from Willimantic, Norwich, this way. They worked in Hartford, worked at Pratt Whitney, and summered out here. And then eventually, again, turns into year-round homes.
I worked with an old-timer years ago, and he said this was his favorite hunting spot, right where the lake is now. It was full of rabbits and pheasants, and we had a blue sign, go all down through there, and he said that was the best hunting spot.
Do we have any questions or anything that anybody brought? Story?
One great thing is this place is great for swimming lessons.
For what?
Swimming. I learned how to swim in this lake. It's the only place I ever took swimming lessons.
Originally, swimming was, I think originally was the PTA who conducted
Well, I
this.
did through Red Cross, so I have no idea
Well,
who
well
did
they were the ones that brought it here. And then the Rec Commission, and then Alcoa has been doing it for several years through the Red Cross. I mean, they get the Red Cross out here. And the Lake Association has always encouraged everybody to swim, so that they don't, when they offer swim lessons, they've always offered it to anybody to take the swim lessons. They don't restrict it to members
My
only.
brother and I went through the whole program every summer. In fact, he actually worked for him for his public summers. He used to row our boat. Our cottage is up in the cove, called the cove, and he used to row the boat down there every morning.
Which is another thing that a lot of the lakes in the area don't have lifeguards like we have here. Which is something that a lot of people like when you bring your children down here and you have lifeguards on duty. It's very expensive.
Are you able to get the same lifeguard every summer?
We've had the same head lifeguard for several years now. Linda Flavel has been with us for a long time. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, people seem to like the lifeguard. And that's one of the big expenses for our dues is the lifeguard. The beach area itself, being the taxes and maintenance, and we have a lot of vandalism that takes place here. It used to be at the Red Barn, it has now been transferred over here. Yeah, with the security guard, that helps a whole lot. Anything, anybody, any questions? I could go on and on and on and on and on. This pavilion here was built in '86. Art Shattuck was instrumental in getting that for us, the Shattuck Shack. Took several times to go through the membership to get it, and it's still evolving. This year they have soda they've added to it. They're talking about maybe a flooring of this someday. I mean, again, developing. Yeah, there's no. Some people say no. Some people say concrete. Yeah, it's got electricity.
Hey, Diane, I know it's not on this late subject, but what is the status of Route 6 as far as the environmental?
Well, I think I can answer that quite clearly. I think what we need to do is turn that over to State Representative Pam Sawyer, who's with us today. And let her answer that.
Pam, where is she? There she is.
She's running away.
There she is. Pam Sawyer. What's the status of Route 6 nowadays?
Well, my daughter thinks being to walk home, she thinks it's going to take that long to answer the question. Right now, the State Department of Transportation is finalizing the permit that they want to submit. They're still in great negotiations with the federal agencies. At the present time, all the state agencies are lined up together in concurrence that they would like to build something close to alternate 54. That's the Historic Preservation, it's the Department of Environmental Protection, the DOT, and they're all working together to try and finalize a permit. But what they've been trying to do is make sure it's a permit that will pass the muster of the Army Corps of Engineers and the EPA. So regionally, the EPA and the Army Corps said they didn't want to talk anymore. So I went to Washington and courtesy of Barbara Kennelly's office and met with Joe Lieberman and Sam Gadenson and the federal director of the EPA, and the second in command of the Army Corps was there. And at the end of the meeting, we requested that they at least come back to the table and talk. The federal level has been here. They've taken a tour as recently as last month, and they have requested that the Waltham branch go back and talk some more to us. So we're closer than we've been in a long time. At least the agencies are still in discussion, but I wouldn't pick out any great bets if this is going to happen in the near future.
What gives the Army Corps of Engineers so much power?
Congress. They used to only deal with coastal waters, and then somebody in their great idea gave them purview over inland waters.
Right.
So that gave them a whole different set of powers. And of course, the EPA is omnipotent. They happen to be two agencies that have no check and balance. It's one of they're the oddities in the federal government. There's no other alternative. When those agencies have purview, that's the end. So
No, it has to go to the president at that point in time. When they make their decisions, it goes to the president. Supposedly.
Keyword.
Yes.
So nice.
that's the
I did a whole paper on that just recently, and it's supposedly those larger decisions are supposed to go to then to the president or vice president. And then,
and supposedly they're supposed to go even if they're turned down.
right, exactly.
Supposedly.
Yeah, big word.
And I would love to have a copy of your paper.
Oh,
if you'd
no
like
problem.
To share.
No
That would
problem.
be wonderful.
Actually, I do have a question about that, because my husband and I grew up in Columbia, and my sisters and I grew up with McDonald's, who used to have the house out on the lake, the house with the tree.
Yeah, the tree house.
Yep, and we used to go swimming here all the time, walk down through Lake Road where my grandmother used to live, and walk on down and go swimming and stuff. My husband and I now live in Andover. We bought the house, that old center chimney cape on Wales Road. And one of our concerns, too, is what's going to happen to that beautiful historic home and all our investment into the home and restoring it if the highway goes through. Why bother restoring it if the highway is going to go through?
Right. The discussion with Ben is the highway going to go south of Route 6 or north of Route 6? Is that what you're asking?
I'd like to know exactly what, yeah, Yeah, where's it gonna go?
Well, I think that's been a discussion that many of us have had for now, and I've been in office now for almost 4 years.
Right, yeah.
That and we have 28 years prior to that, people have been saying the same thing. And it seems to keep creeping back to the original alignment, because it was carefully laid out originally.
Right.
And then people say, well, they don't like it, and then they fiddle around and they show all different other possibilities, and that look great on paper. And
Yeah,
then
I know.
You get out there and you look at bolt notch and trying to blow another hole through the notch, and at the top of the notch, there's wetlands up there, and if you do it, where's all the water going to, you know, but they never thought of that because it's on a flat piece of paper.
Right.
So, you know.
See, I'm also an environmental scientist, so it's like I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. Because environmentally, there are a lot of problems with all of the routes. With all of the decisions, there's a problem.
There's environmental problems if you look at the 40-year outlook of this particular region, that there is really no zoning controls to stop the development. And if you lay down the proposals that could be, will be, are on the maps, subdivisions, this area is going to be built up. So now what do we do about the transportation problem between Route 6 and 44? Because Route 6 at the present time and Route 44 are very close to capacity now, if not over capacity during the high traffic times. So how do you move this congestion? And the discussion of mass transit keeps creeping back, but the problem with that is we don't have the ridership, nor do we have the network in the rest of the state nor the rest of New England.
We used to. We used
That's
to. When
a
I
very
was
good
a
point.
kid, we used to.
That's right. And at one time, Andover, the historical points, if you go back, Andover had per day 29 stops at the depot.
I know.
Well, we don't even have a track anymore.
Right.
So,
which
and the
involved
DEP,
me at the time, and I was just a kid.
And Norbridge and the DEP now owns that particular tract of land. The DOT no longer owns it.
Right.
For $1. So there's a wish list that you would like to see, but again, rail sounds wonderful, but unless you're going to put in a full network, what good is it to go from Willimantic to Hartford unless it goes someplace else?
Right, exactly.
And how would you get the ridership and so on and so forth? Well, and that was before, and that's part of the problem with Route 6. The present one, as most of you know, it's been straightened here and there, elbows taken out of it, but it was originally a cart path that followed the bottom land along the river, which connected the farms and connected the ecclesiastical areas, and actually sort of aimed towards Hartford because that was the seat of the main government, and it developed slowly. It was never intended to be a highway.
Right, exactly.
It was never a state highway.
Same thing with Route
or a
44.
major local road.
Right.
And when then of course the rail came through, and then it was improved and tucked in along the rail so that people could get to it, and it was again before it was paved over and so on and so forth. Then rail begins to die off. It becomes the more major connector between the two state capitals, Providence and Hartford. And at different points, we thought we were going to connect Providence and Hartford, then it got shortened, and we thought we were going to connect Danielson and Hartford, and that was Willimantic and Hartford, and different pieces got built. And of course, you remember, probably I'm sure, the piece in East Hartford that wasn't built for a long time.
Right.
And that had tremendous environmental problems, and 291 had far worse environmental problems than we're talking about here. And if you talk to the DOT, you know Route 11 that goes to nowhere, it drops off on Route 2 and then drops you off down on 82 to 85. They would like to finish that little piece to connect to 95, and that is a real true connector to go between interstate to interstate. That piece has, they say, almost twice as many environmental impacts as just this little 11 mile, and that's about 11 miles down there too.
Right.
So it's much harder to complete. They've literally thrown that off the books.
The towns that are involved with Route 6 and all these other plans, what plan do they like? But most of the towns like Bolton, Andover, Columbia, Willimantic, what plan do they like the best out of all the plans?
It usually goes back to your original plan, the one that we've all been
54.
anticipating. You've taken the land off our tax rolls. We've always expected it to go there. Why doesn't it go there? Then you go to other people and say, well, but you know, it's a little better if it's over here. It's much better over here. There's a historical thing over here. There's a still active farm here. Things are changing to the values. You know, in this particular area, with this lake in particular, you hear the stories of taking over the farms, people that didn't even own the land, and they filled it in with water. There was a different value to farmland back then because this was all farmland.
Right.
There were a few city folk that meandered way out here, but it was more difficult to get here. You didn't live out here all year long. You might have a summer place perhaps, but you farmed it if you were out here. Farming was it. This was agrarian. Now it's flip-flop the other way. You look at homes that were farms. You look at whatever open space is left. You know, this is an argument that comes around with the DEP and goes around in circles, as you may have heard. The EPA rather says that we have some pre-Columbian forestation and animals and so on and so forth. And then you hear the first select woman in Columbia throwing her hands up in the air and saying, "What, are you crazy? You're worried about 100-acre forest blocks," she said. And you go back to the historians, and they'll tell you that
there was no
at the turn of the
forest.
century, this was 70 to 90% deforested. There were no trees. And there's a picture that I've seen.
The Historical Society
The
has
Historical
it.
Society got it, that showed the top by the Yeomans on Bunker Hill. And they look down over the church, and they look way south, and there's not a tree to be seen except for one in the center of a cow pasture, this gorgeous, beautiful maple-looking thing. And that's almost the focal point of this photo. And you hear the first selectwoman in Columbia, and she says, "You're arguing about trees and so on and so forth." She says, "We've got them growing out of our gutters, and we can't cut them down fast enough."
And she's right. Adele is right.
So we go round and round with, if you can't build, if you have the capacity need for cars, which we apparently are at that point, and certainly in the next 40 years,
well, the reason why we're at that capacity is because there's no mass transportation.
There's no mass transportation, and there's no stopping the development.
Right, exactly.
So you have those two situations. What are you going to do looking into the future?
Right.
And that's a long.
Yep.
Going along with the highway thing here, one of the things that Andover Lake has that other lakes in the area doesn't have. We have no highway that goes by here.
Right.
Nobody drives
Look at
by
Columbia.
Andover Lake.
Yeah.
You drive to it. Bolton Lake has Route 44. I mean, you go down 44, you see this lake, you know, let's go explore it. Columbia Lake has Route 87. Pocatello has Route 66.
Well,
it's Columbia's 31.
Route 85.
Yeah, that's the end of the lake. You can't see
But
that.
Andover, again, there's many people, you can live in town for years and never get down to this corner if you don't belong. There's no reason to go by here or even find it. Which another point I wanted to make sure we mentioned was, from time to time when we're having our little problems here at the Lake Association, people say, "Why don't you just give it to the town? Maybe turn it over and give it to the town." And in fact, we tried to do that back in '83. When we decided, yeah, we're going to have to build this dam, we didn't have the money, where we're going to get it, just back, give it to the town, make it a town lake, and many of the lakes in the area are town lakes. Columbia Lake is a town lake. They run it, they tax their people for it, and yay. Gene Gasper was first selectman at the time, and they formed a group, and they looked at taking on Andover Lake, and basically they said, they don't want it. You guys deal with it. And that's why, again, we had to put the bill for the dam to $350,000. So,
I have a question for Pam. Did I understand correctly, you said that the proposed permit that they're working on is leaning more towards the original alternate 54? So does that mean 18 and 25 are out of the question, or whichever ones that were going to our town hall, or are they just kind of on the back burner? Maybe we'll get to that.
Pretty much they are off the map. The problem seems to be fairly insurmountable going through Bolton Notch.
Okay.
To use 18 and 25, they wouldn't go through the existing notch, they would cut another hole south of there.
Right.
And the expense of going through that particular hunk of rock would be very, very, very expensive. Part of the development of the road requires that it meet this least environmentally damaging, practicable alternative. And that word practicable, which I think somebody invented to put in there, but that means, well, part of that means cost. And for them to go through whether they're going to tunnel under, however they're going to get through the notch, is a very, very expensive proposition when you're looking at a road that costs over $500 an inch. You know, you don't want to have, and that's a plain road. the less bridging you have to do, the less tunneling, the less explosives you have to use, and cart the fill away.
Is it true, Pam, that the route that the EPA favored would cost 100 million more than 54?
That's part of the argument. Yes, they designed one that was done in a quick afternoon situation, and again, done on flat paper, trying to skirt what they considered important, which were 100-acre forest blocks.
Right.
You know, don't build through the forest, and trying to follow sort of some of the road lines that we already have. But that was so much more expensive, and it crossed the Hop River 4 times, as opposed to alternate 54, which doesn't, or 133, which crosses it twice. So in this case, we had the DEP and the EPA fighting over the value of the Hop River. The Hop River happens to be, like Andover Lake, classified as a Class A river, even though it is greatly disturbed by homes and businesses. It still manages to be relatively clean, and it starts right in Bolton in a peat bog up behind Munson's that actually was mined until 1970. The peat was taken out of there for heat, so that's not pre-Columbian either.
Right, and plus there's not a lot of life forms in the lake, and there's not, I mean, in the river, and I mean, it's been disturbed for so many years over the centuries that it's not even following the same path that originally followed. So,
but the water is still very, very clean.
Yeah.
And so the discussion is how much more pressure can it take, how much more bridging, how much more traffic over it, should it be disturbed? And the DEP is very pro-river. They don't want to disturb it anymore because they feel it's doing fine by itself, and the EPA is throwing its hands up in the air, and then the Army Corps gets in the middle of it.
I understood that the DEP wanted to make it part of the similar, or part of the Black Ledge. Isn't there a Black Ledge waterway preservation?
There's been discussion about it.
And they were comparing the qualities of both rivers and saying or determining that the Hop River was of equal or better qualities as Black Ledge. So I think the quality of the Hop River has been improved to almost, you can say, could drink it almost
yeah.
But I guess the drainage coming from the ridge, I don't know what the name of the ridge is on the other side. So
Yeah, I know.
but that drainage going into the river, it percolates and it.
Well, I hate to say, but if they don't put the highway through and they start building up like it's already started to, that's going to drastically change. So no matter what you do, whether you put the highway in or not, the building is going to go in, and that's going to change the water.
Well, that's been part of the major discussion with the EPA looking at this beautiful, pristine greenway.
Right.
Is that they would like to preserve it. Well, the joke is that the reason it remains green is because it's been the thread of an expressway. You take the thread of the expressway off, and what's going to happen? Well, it's so beautiful. It's a perfect location to
build.
So what do? Do you put it in the homes? Do you build? And not do anything about the roads. You can widen them a little bit, but you have 200 driveways along Route 6.
Right.
You have the water on one side, and you have ridge on the other side in different places. And typical of country building, what you have along Route 6, most people don't think of it. They say, well, the state owns so much right of way. If you pull right of way, it usually takes over someone's well or septic system, because in the country you have one in the front yard, one in the backyard.
Right.
And so you run into a real problem trying to widen the road, disrupting homes all along the way.
Well, there again, there are a lot of colonial homes along Route 6 that have their front door right on.
Well, now you've got now you've got historical issues.